This episode of Broken Bones and Bullshit is sponsored by Ozcan Rule. My next guest is Warren Matotek. Welcome onto the show, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
What a fabulous sort of career you've had just in announcing. You were there from the start.
Well, yeah, and a ways before that too. You know, I mean, I think the first rodeo that I ever got paid to do was back in 1988 at Bartlett Park in Townsville, and anyway, they couldn't get an announcer, and they asked me if I'd do it, and I did it, and 2 days, and they paid me $250, and I kind of went, wow, it's a pretty good lick, you know, but. You know, I was still riding bulls at the time, and anyway, long story short, I just kept riding bulls, and I'd go to rodeos, and they'd pay me to announce. And
so you would announce the ones
that I was competing at, and anyway, I would I'd stand there with my chaps and everything, put my chaps on, and keep announcing the bull riding, and someone would get my rope on my bull, and then I'd just hand the mic to somebody and get on and ride, you know, and that's what I did, you know, and it was hard to do. It was hard to do because, you know, you really need to get a clear train of thought, you know, before you nod your head, and so juggling it was very hard, but I was young. And, you know, I mean, when you're young, you can do a lot of different things at once, you know.
Enthusiastic.
Yeah. So, but anyway.
Yeah, let's take us back to how you started riding. Are you first generation rodeo cowboy or?
No, my great auntie, Laura Collinson, was a maiden name. She's one of 13 kids. Grew up there, just north of Ayr in North Queensland, and she was, in fact, the 1936 Ladies Queensland bronc riding champion.
Oh, wow.
And, I remember I used to go down to her place of a weekend and buck out all the milking cows and, you know, anything that she had there. You know, I'd just get on it as a kid, you know, and all her family, the rest of her family and her kids and everything became cane farmers. And she really connected with me because I was the only one that really wanted to go and work in the bush and ride in rodeos, you know. So she was very helpful to me when I started out as a kid, you know, because she wanted to, she just liked what I did because I did what she did, you know. And anyway, I sort of progressed. I started going to some rodeos, you know, in North Queensland back in the late 1970s, and I went to a bull riding school at Dave Johnson's in 1981, and anyway, 82 I won my first ARRA open bull ride when I was 16, and just kept rodeoing.
How long did you ride bulls for?
15 years. I got on my first bull when I was open bull when I was 13, and I got on my last bull when I was 29. Around about 15 years, and I competed in every association in Australia at the time, and
you went overseas?
Yeah, went over to the US in 1990, and went over there and was riding in, doing a heap of amateur rodeos and bull ridings and that sort of stuff that was going on, and was travelling with one of my best buddies who only died a couple of years ago, Noose Cook, and it was, we had a bunch of fun. I mean, we would travel to rodeos, and we would wear the same clothes for 2 or 3 days, and I'd say, Noose, you know, this is not right, you know, and he said, hell it was. He said, we're in a different town every day. Nobody knows what we wore yesterday. We'd have a shower in a lake somewhere, and we'd go to a bar that night, and we'd drink all night. Anyway, after about 3 months, I said to Noose, I can't handle this. I said, just drinking all night and everything. And he said to me, think about this. It's only 8 seconds. You've only got to give it all you got for 8 seconds. So that became my motto then. I thought, righto, if that's all you got to do is give it 8 seconds, I can do that.
Yeah,
And have a good time.
A little bit hungover.
Yeah, have a good time, yeah. But
And did you have much success in America?
yeah, well, that year, believe it or not, I mean, I was down to all them amateur rodeos and that sort of stuff, and I mean, I rode 36 bulls out of 40
Wow.
that year, and I mean, I got a lot of bulls that made one round and jumped out of it, or 2 rounds and jumped out of it, and I got on some really good bulls too, and won quite a bit of money. But in saying that, like I said, there was a lot of bulls I got on that, you were going to be 70 points on, 75 points on, and but that's the way it was, we're going to those rodeos, and I went back again in '94 and got my PRCA card, and went to a bunch of pro rodeos over there, and won a bit of money, and was, thank goodness for the day money over there and the bull riding at them pro rodeos, it keeps you going, because it costs you so much money, even there in '94, I think it was costing me like $1,000 a week,
Wow.
to enter, 2 or 3 rodeos and traveling
And were you working while you were there?
No.
No,
I was just riding bulls. Yeah, so that's what I was doing, And I won a rodeo in Miles City, Montana, and won the bull riding there. And anyway, I got off the bull pretty good. And anyway, my back went really bad, and I struggled with it. I had a bit of treatment over there, and I struggled with it and struggled with it and struggled with it, and I ended up coming home early. And I only got on a couple more bulls when I got home, and anyway, that was it. And the doctor said to me, look, if you want to continue to keep walking, then you need to, give this away. And I wasn't ready to give it away because I was only 29, But
felt like you still had heaps of life left in you.
I did. I had a lot of life left in me, and I think I didn't really get it until I turned 25. That's when I really started riding bulls consistently. I was, and I'll be honest, I was never a great bull rider. I mean, I made the NFR here 3 times, but I was never the great bull rider that was going to jump out and make 90-point rides or whatever. But I was the guy that everyone had to beat if they wanted to win something. You know what I mean? Like, I was one of those guys that...
like a journeyman.
Yeah, they had to beat me to win what they won,
And back when you were riding it was pretty stiff competition back then too. We had a lot of great cowboys competing in that era.
There's always been great cowboys, no matter where you are, what era you're in, so long as you are, in the top of your era, whether you were a champion or you were one of the top 15 in your era. I mean, that is an achievement in itself, because you're only as good as what the competition is. So, as things in the sport have progressed, we've seen, some people say to me that, who do you think's the greatest bull rider, ever, that Australia's ever produced, I mean, everyone says, and I would say, Troy Dunn's probably the greatest guy I've ever seen come out of Australia. But you've got to go back on a era situation, and I've seen guys make great bull rides back in the early 1980s, that you would see at the PBR World Finals or the NFR today, but on their day, the right circumstances, the right bull, everything clicks, and you see history made, from great bull riders, not from just guys that may ride 1 or 2 here and there, but, the good guys, the Dave Johnsons, the Shane Conleys, the Steve Thorns, I mean, I could go on and on and on and start throwing names in there, Peter Glenwright, Royce Dunn, there's just been so many good bull riders that I've seen, over the years, that on that particular day, have made some of the greatest rides that are still stuck in my head.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and I think it happens, you know, and it's whether it's bull riding or bronc riding or you know, calf roping, for instance. You know, I mean, I can remember watching guys like Danny McGuire and Neville McCarthy and that, you know, in the early 1980s roping calves, and I mean, those guys are running out there 9 and 10 seconds, you know, and it was way back then, you know, and we kind of missed the mark a little bit, I think, where we kind of really, like we were talking about before, you know, we forget about where we've come from, and we forget about a lot of people who have been great in their era, you know, and that's the thing, you know, you're always going to have, there's an era that you competed in, you know, so I always think, you know, about if you were a good cowboy, you know, as long as you were one of those top 15 in that era, then, you know, you got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And that's why I thought this podcast was important, to be able to share them stories of the good cowboys that's come before us, and because it's funny, a lot of people only know you for what you're doing right now, so they know you as the commentator. And I was speaking to Darryl Doyle about this too, and everybody knew him as a photographer. Never realised that
he was a bareback rider.
He was a good bareback rider.
Yeah.
And did good things in the sport. So I was like, well, there is a spot for this, I think.
Yeah, you know, I mean, history is a very important part. I know I am an absolute fan of the sport of rodeo, like 100%. And you know, I mean, if you turn the TV on in my place, in my house, the number one thing that I'll be watching is the cowboy channel. You know, I'll be watching rodeo, you know, or I'll be watching the PBR, you know. But they're the two biggest things in my life, apart from riding cutting horses, which I've been involved in now for quite some time, and that was a journey in itself, you know, because I was lucky. I was fortunate enough when I had to make the decision in '94 to, you know, to wrap up riding bulls. And, you know, and I rode bucking horses. I rode bareback horses for a couple of years. I rode broncs for a couple of years. You know, I roped calves. I've team roped. I've steer wrestled. I've competed in every single event at one point. You know, I was never good at them, you know, but bull riding, I could get by on, you know. And but when it came to finally having to wrap up riding bulls, I was very fortunate because I had a gift of being able to announce rodeos.
So once you had to give it up, you never got sour on it because you couldn't continue to ride bulls?
No, I got drunk for about 2 years. I mean, I sort of, you know, I mean, you know, like I drank very heavily for a couple of years. Very, very heavily. And because it was something that I was not ready to let go of, you know. But in saying that, I was very, very lucky. That same year was the next year I met my wife. So if it wasn't for her and her encouragement to keep me going and keep me involved in the sport, because Judy Rodeo, she was a barrel racer and a breakaway roper, and she and I, we had a common goal, you know, the rodeo. So she encouraged me as much as she could, you know, to keep going, you know. And I think 2005, I think I did 53 events or something for the year.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was just ringing me all the time, wanting me to come and announce their events. And that was okay. That was okay, but the thing about it is what the rodeos were paying to go and do the events was not, you think you do 53 events a year, well, it's not really worth what it was costing me to travel.
Yeah.
You know, so I sort of had to break that down and say, well, start eliminating events based on distance. Yeah. So we made the move from North Queensland down to Tamworth for 5 years, and I said, we'll go to Tamworth for 5 years, go to New South Wales, expose myself to bigger crowds, more professional events, and we will see what happens. And in 5 years' time, if nothing changes, we'll move on. So we went down there, and anyway, I was doing some big ABCRA rodeos down there, and did the NFR with Glenn Morgan, and we were doing some pro rodeos, and anyway, it got to about 1997. I was kind of to the point where I just had enough. I said to Judy, these rodeos, they're just 12-hour business, it's just too much. I said, they're not changing anything. It's just 12 hours, and it's, you may as well have an egg and spoon race, and the people only show up when it gets dark, and it's, and then they want to drag it out till 11 o'clock at night. And
by the time people show up, you've been going for 9 hours.
Yeah.
Trying to talk constantly.
Yeah, and I was ready to give it away. People were ringing me up, and I'd say, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Anyway, I got a call from Troy Dunn, and he said, look, Wazza, he said, I'm wanting to kick off pro bull riding here in Australia. We want to start the CBR. And do you want to be a part of it? And I said, no. I said, I don't want to be a part of it. Excuse me. I said, I don't believe we can make it happen here. I said, because there's too much, there's too much fragmentation in the sport. Everybody wants to do their own thing here and there. Nobody wants to work together, okay, and make something good. Have one good deal, someone gets pissed off with this association, so they go and start another one. And this is how things get watered down, So anyway, I turned Troy down with being a part of a board with the championship bull riders. And anyway, Judy said to me, she said, you're silly, she said, you should go and announce these events. And, maybe they might
be something special.
Be refreshing. And anyway, so I did. And anyway, we kicked off that year, and I did the majority of them, and then I did the first finals there in Tamworth, in the old arena there back in 98 with Glenn Morgan. Glenn and I did it. Anyway, we went again the next year in 99, and Bundaberg Rum got involved. Money started rolling in. Things started happening. These events were paying big money. And they got a TV deal, and anyway, so in 1999, Troy Dunn, Glenn Young, and Troy Dan got together and created the DYD Extreme Bull Riding, the Troy Dunn International in Townsville at the Entertainment Centre. So that Bundaberg Rum had offered me a sponsorship deal that year and said, we want to give you all this money if you wear our shirts and, be a Bundaberg Rum announcer. Anyway, Glenn rang me and told me what he was going to do. And I said, I said, yeah. And I said to him, look, Bundaberg Rum are going to sponsor me. And then he said, he said, you can't do the event if you've got Bundaberg Rum. He said, we've got Jack Daniels.
Oh, wow.
And I said, really? And I said, okay. So I rang Ross Peoples from Bundaberg Rum, and I said, look, I can't be a part of this team. I said, I really want to do this international bull riding in Townsville. I said, I'm willing to give it all up just so that I can be a part of this, And he understood. Anyway, I went to Townsville, and anyway, I give that away. I had to wear a Jack Daniels shirt. And, J.W. Hart, Justin McBride, Terry Don West, all these guys, they were all there, from the US. And here's all these other guys, the bull riders, that wearing Bundaberg Rum shirts and all this kind of stuff. because I was considered the front man,
You couldn't.
I couldn't do that. I had to wear a Jack Daniels shirt. So anyway, that was neither here nor there, but it was, what it did was it opened my eyes up, and I got to work with they brought a guy over to do the music, Gogi Grant, and I got to work with Gogi, and he did all the Bud Light Cups in the US, and he got to talking to me, and and saying to me, look, maybe you should, you really need to pursue this, and stick with it. And he offered me some advice. And anyway, the next year, when Townsville ran again, Tough Hedeman came out, and a bunch of other American guys, so Tough was out here, and I got to be pretty good friends with Tough. And anyway, I got to work with Tough Hedeman there. He and I and Justin Beavers, we all three of us co-announced the event, which was pretty cool. And then after that year, the CBR folded and it became Bull Riding Australia. So the moment that happened, they lost Bundaberg Rum, and then there was some other guys that came in, and they were going to they got the name of PBR here in Australia, and they headed off in another direction. Okay, so this has been a never-ending cycle in Australia, that I've seen, where we see this, this fragmentation, and guys get pissed off and go and want to do something else, think that they can go and do this, instead of holding their ground and, working with everybody, working with people, getting together, and the same thing's happening today, with rodeo. It's been here forever and a day, So to get things in perspective, I thought, well, I'm going to stick with this deal, and I was still announcing a few rodeos, and I thought, no, I'm going to stick with this. And so I was doing all the Bull Riding Australia events. And then in 2002 actually, a good friend of mine over in the US was getting married, and he had a fair bit to do with, he was one of the coaches at Northwest College in Powell, Wyoming. And he said to me, he said, look, Woz, he said, how about you come over and be my best man at my wedding, and while you're here, you can announce the college rodeo in Cody for 3 nights.
That's cool.
And I said, that sounds like a pretty good idea. I'd love to do that, So I went over for the wedding and met up with a bunch of old bull riders, that I'd been rodeoing with over there. And anyway, so I got to work the college rodeo for 3 nights. And it was an absolute eye-opener of, in Cody Stampede Stadium and Yellowstone there, and I mean, they had all the good contractors, Sankey's, Brookman, all the good contractors. Yeah, anyway, he said, the only thing you're going to have to do, he said, with the college rodeo is, he said, they have goat tying as well. So I remember watching the girls back when I started rodeoing, tying goats and things like that, I said, yeah, I can do that. So anyway, I ran with it. And I did the rodeo there for three nights, and it was pretty amazing actually, a lot of the guys over there were, gave me a lot of really good feedback, and I learned a lot too while I was there. And it's something that's very, very important, and it is how you present not only yourself, but the way you present an opening of an event. Okay, because the first 5 minutes that people hear your voice and watch the event as it opens will give them a lasting impression on what the experience is going to be for the rest of the night.
You need to grab them straight away.
That's exactly right. You have to be able to use your voice and a technique to get their attention and captivate them and get them in your hand the moment that you start. You can't be just idle into it, so to speak. It has to be, people are like, wow, this is like, when the curtain comes back at a movie. There it is. There's the movie you've been wanting to see all your life, and there it is. So anyway, so I did that rodeo and I came home. I kept working the Bull Riding Australia events, and anyway, 2005, funny enough, I get a call from my friend Gavin again, and he said, listen, Woz, he said, I'm running a CBR event, Championship Bull Riders. Tough Hedeman had left the PBR and he was president of the CBR. He said, I'm running a CBR in Cody, Wyoming. And he said, here's the phone call of the general manager. He said, give him a call. He said, you might be able to get some other events while you're here. So I gave him a call, and he said, well, listen, he said, if you're going to come over and announce this event in Cody, he said, we're running Huron, South Dakota at the South Dakota State Fair next week. He said, I'll hire you to do that one. So I went over, and anyway, my wife came with me, and we announced announced the bull riding with another announcer in Cody, Shane Burris, and got to work with Pam Minnick and Tough, and I mean, like, Pam Minnick is just one of the most iconic women in the world of rodeo in the world. She's been a former Miss Rodeo America. She's announced in Houston, and just the most loveliest lady you could ever meet. Just amazing, and anyway, because it's all there. These events are all televised, and and the CBR was trying to cash in on the PBR kind of thing, and they had some good bull riders riding there, and so anyway, I worked that night there in Cody, and then my wife and I headed off, and we drove over to South Dakota and went to Huron, and anyway, I did this rodeo there, and Chad Berger had bulls there, and there was a lot of other gate contractors and a lot of guys I knew that had come over to Bull Riding Australia events, McKinnon, Wembley, and people like that, and they were riding in the CBR too. So I went there and I announced it. It was 2 nights at the State Fair, and I remember the first night as I opened the event, and after Pam Minnick walked out, and she turned around, she said to the audience, she said, well, what do you think about our announcer that's here, Warren, that's come all the way from Australia? And anyway, they all cheered and everything, and I thought, oh, well, that's pretty nice, with Pam, to say something like that. But that's the way she, as I say, just the ultimate professional.
Ozcan Rural, providing Southwest Victoria with everything related custom sheep and cattle yards. Get in touch with the fellas via email ozcanrural@gmail.com. That's AUS, can like the one you drink, rural@gmail.com. Building fences straighter than your local politician.
So all this time, I'm getting to work with some really good people. Getting to work,
and that helped with your style.
Yeah, and the year before I got to work with Brandon Bates, who was doing all the big events for the PBR. So I got to work with Brandon. So while we were over there doing these CBR events, Judy and I jumped on a plane. We flew down to Fort Lauderdale in Florida. We went to a Built Forward Tough Series event and hung out with Brandon for a couple of days, And I kind of got to meet, and I was lucky enough because I got to meet a lot of the bull riders and people that had come out here to Australia, with the PBR. So it was at that time, and I said to Judy, I said, we need to be stepping this up a notch here. So their sound director at the time was a guy called Mark Evans, and he was actually Chuck Logan. But Mark Evans was subbing for him, and he used to do some of the events that Chuck couldn't. So I said to him, what kind of sound program do you use? So he showed us how he set everything up. So we came home, we bought the program, and we started downloading music, and we bought sound equipment, and that's how Judy got to start doing all the music, because I said to her, we need to be able to run the same show every single weekend, and not one week work with some sound guy that does this, or whatever. We need to choreograph this thing. And, and the number one thing I've learned over the years is, and in what I do is, the fans come first. Without the fans, you don't have $1 to pay for the event. Right? The fans are the number one priority. You entertain them, keep them happy, and keep them wanting to come back. That is your priority. The number two is the stroke factor of the sponsors. You have got to stroke the sponsors, and you really do. I mean, they're putting their money in, and they're paying a lot of the bills. Okay. The next thing is you have to be able to not just say this is such and such from such and such or whatever. You have to be able to tell a story.
Yeah. And grab people to be invested in that person.
Exactly. So a story. So you start off an event, and it is exactly what I learned from those guys over there, is the way you open an event, you get the audience captivated, and from there, it's just like telling a storybook, okay? So the story, you're telling the story, you're like the guy that just gets there and voiceovers the story. That's right. So then you try and take people on a journey with you and the bull riders. Okay. So you have to bring flair, and because the number one thing is you can't be just like, when I grew up in an era where announcers were just Joe Blow from who was the local butcher or something. He'd get up there in the announcer stand and yada yada yada, when there was only really one very good announcer back in the day that when I started off, and that was a guy called Ted Hinds. And Ted did everything. And I studied a lot of Ted's style and everything, and Ted had a very Western flair, okay, the way he did things. And it kind of made me realise that we're in Western sports. We're not football. Yeah. We're not some bogan friggin' sport. Yeah. You know what I mean? We are Western sport orientated. Bull riding came from rodeo. So we have to hold on to that heritage. So Judy and I set about working out our plan of attack with what we did. And then in 2006, I had the opportunity to go back and announce some more events with the CBR. But Tough said, I'll hire to do some events over there. And anyway, the PBR, Troy and Jackie got the PBR to open up here in Australia, and they were very instrumental in doing that. So I didn't want to jeopardise anything with the PBR, so I said to Judy, no, I'm not going to go back there. I'm going to stick with the PBR here in Australia. So that's what I did. So therefore, with Glenn Young being the general manager and moving forward into the picture, the number one thing that we needed was international content, okay, because just the talent here in Australia, the depth pool is not there, but if you bring big names from overseas over that to key events, that will sell tickets. Yeah. It keeps selling tickets because they're seeing somebody that they've only heard about on the TV or whatever. So from there, therefore, every year when we had the finals or some key events, Glenn would endeavour to bring the best announcers from the PBR to Australia to work with me. So I got to work with Clint Atkins, who is, I got to work with Clint half a dozen times here in Australia, and then I got to work with guys like... Did
you ever work with J.W. Hart?
J.W. Hart was riding bulls back then. But I got to work with some really, really good guys that came over here. And anyway, so every year I got to work with them, and I got to hone my craft, and I got to just, every time I picked up a microphone, I had to step up to their level. So it wasn't about just, and Glenn could see that from the very first time I went to America. He could see that whenever I came back, that I'd got better. Yeah.
Iron sharpens iron, so you ran them guys.
Exactly. I had to step up. So I had to step up to try and be as good as what they were. And when I came home, before every performance, I give my wife a kiss and I say to her, I said, tonight, darling, let's do a better job than we did last week.
Yes, sir.
We stepped this thing up, okay? Because that's a key. You can never ever be complacent, because there's always somebody else that's wanting your job.
Hungry. And
There's always some new guy there that wants your job. So the only way you can prevent that from happening, and Brandon Bates told me that, he said, is to tie it up. He said, you tie it up here in Australia. He said, so by that, he meant by being, by continually evolving and being better than I was yesterday, but also tying up the PBR by continually, they had no option but to employ me to go and do every event.
People worry about job security. Do the best job possible, and that's job security.
That is exactly right.
It's so important that they can't sack you.
That's right.
You do such a great job.
That's exactly right. So that's what I had to do. And then in 2007, the PBR started the very first World Cup. So they ran it at the Gold Coast for 3 nights. So Brandon came over and he announced with me, and I mean, Randy Bernard, the whole PBR production crew came to Australia. And there was 3 nights. They sold it out every single night at the convention centre there. And I was the only guy that had to work for the crew with all the Americans. So I'm up there, and anyway, they had this computerised scoring system that they brought over with them. And Brandon had told me about it. He'd showed me it over there in Fort Lauderdale. And anyway, I was like, man, this is amazing, because when those guys were coming over, they're just throwing numbers at me, and I'm adding them up in my head, and I got notes written here, like for hours. Anyway, and he said, I'm really just a dummy. He said, so we just stand up here and it all comes up on the screen, the next bull rider, what he's done, his stats, the whole deal, the scores come through. It's all just
a prompter,
just right there in front of you, But you still have to tell the story, and you still have to do your job, but you have all of those things at your disposal instantly. So we did this global cup, the World Cup is what it was called back then, and it only ran for about 3 years. And anyway, the PBR dropped it off, and but it was an absolute experience to work with this team. And I've told this story to quite a few people before. And the first night, Randy Bernard, he was such an absolute. He was so. I don't know how he was so driven to give the greatest show, deliver the greatest experience to the fans, that Brandon and I, we started at 2:30 in the afternoon rehearsing the opening for the show.
Wow.
And they actually held the doors for 30 minutes. We were still rehearsing. And it wasn't right. He wasn't happy. And we had to keep doing it over and over and over again. And Brandon said to me, he said, this is what he's like. He said, no wonder I've got to take sleeping tablets and all this kind of stuff every night. He said, he's just on the edge all the time,
Perfectionist.
Yeah, and anyway, and I thought that was great. But these rehearsals, it was like just, anyway, when we kicked the curtain the first night, everything was perfect, And anyway, Randy came up to me there at the end of the night, bought me a beer, said, great job, well done, and away we went. And then team meetings next morning, because that's the way it's all done over there. And so we got through the World Cup, and I thought, oh yeah, well, this is really good, we're really getting somewhere. And we were, and Troy and Jackie, they were really pumping it, with the PBR, and Jackie was holding down the fort, and she was a one-woman wonder. Like, she would do everything. She would collect money at the gates at events. She would be, scoring in the merch stand. She was just everywhere.
There's 10 of her.
That's exactly right. I mean, it was almost as though they'd cloned the lady. She just was doing every single job, because the budget still wasn't there to be able to pay key people. So, and Glenn decided after a few years that he was going to go to America. So he left and he went to America for a couple of years. So that was the time that Paul Dainty, kind of took over the PBR here. They thought they were going to buy a sport and create this massive global entertainment enterprise here in Australia, but they realised that by buying a sport, they were buying a lot more. Yeah. So they only held on to it for a few years. They did a lot of good things. I mean, they were key players in bringing the World Cup to Australia, and so we continued on this journey with the PBR, and Judy and I travelling every weekend, going to, every event that was on all around the country. And anyway, we kept going, and they kept bringing American guys over, like Garrett Yarrigan, for instance. And Garrett was only a young guy then in the US, and he's gone on to win 2 PRCA Announcer of the Year titles over there. And anyway, in 2019, they brought Luke Kaufman over. Luke was doing all the Pendle and Whiskey Velocity events in the US. And he came over and he announced Cairns with me. And then the next weekend we had PBR Global Cup in Sydney. Anyway, so Luke and I got the job to do the Global Cup at Cutest Bank Arena, and Judy got the gig of doing the music director. So it was a big feather in her cap, because they bring the best bull riders from every country in the world were there, and everyone was there, and it was all live on CBS in the US, and the whole 9 yards. And it was an incredible experience, You got Jose Vitor Lemmy at the height of his career, and Jas Lockwood, and I mean, the greatest bull riders. They're all there. And it was something that I never ever thought I would ever be a part of, but it was something that was, had been in the pipeline. And it was only because of guys like Glenn Young, Troy and Jackie Dunn, and people like that paved the way, did all the footwork, to get to that, to bring all that to fruition. It was never anything that I had to do with it. You know what I mean? I was just a piece of the puzzle, but it was all the work that they had done to be able, PBR Australia, to be able to produce events like that. So we did that event, and Luke and Matt Merritt said to me, they said, "Look, Oz, would you like to come over and maybe do some Pendle and Whiskey Velocity events in the US?" And I said, "Oh, that'd be great." And I said, "Oh, we'll make it happen." So anyway, they talked to the guys over there, and anyway, the Global Cup was in Arlington at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium at AT&T. So I said, "Listen, Judy and I are going to come over for the Global Cup, support the team." And anyway, so the PBR offered me an event in Pendle and Whiskey Velocity Tour event, Hampton, Virginia. And all the time I'd been rodeoing over in the US, I'd never really been over in the East much, so it was a great opportunity. So we went over there and we went to the Global Cup, and that was really cool. And then, so we flew up to Charlotte, North Carolina, and we hung out with Luke Kaufman and his wife, and Matt Merritt and his wife and family, and then we drove over to Hampton, Virginia, and it's a very old stadium. It's middle of winter, mind you, and ice everywhere, and the lakes are frozen, and Judy and I put our foot in the Atlantic Ocean, and it was just freezing. And anyway, we did this velocity event, and Luke and I and Matt. And it was amazing. It was amazing. A very historic Coliseum. Elvis Presley had actually played in that building. Wow. And one of the dressing rooms, that was one of the dressing rooms that we had. Was his dressing room and that, and back in the day. And very old historical building. But we did that event, and anyway, COVID hit that week.
Wow.
And I was talking to those guys, and they said, "Oh, we'll get you back to do some more events." And anyway, I thought, "Oh, yeah, this will be good. I'll come back, be able to do a couple of events and everything." COVID hit. We just got home, and they shut the borders out, shut everything down, and so anyway, that kind of put a bit of a dampener on that, you know. And but it was a great opportunity for me, and then we went through a real hard time, you know, with the PBR with COVID, you know, and Glenn had some hard decisions to make. He had to let a lot of staff go. And then he had to put a strategic plan together to try and keep the PBR going, because they had to do the same thing in the US, you know, and Canada, and, you know, the wheels need to keep turning, and, you know, bull riders, their families, and everybody in the industry need to feed their families. Yeah. So Glenn proposed a scheme where we would run 2 events in one day, and at the time we could only have 500 people. That included riders, staff, and fans at the event, because they were the restrictions. So we had to do 2 perfs in one day, wherever we were, and we're for about a third of the money that we were getting to do one night. So everybody had their budget just. So basically we're just doing it just to survive, just to keep the wheels turning. Anyway, it got better in 2001. Things started to pick up, and we were allowed to have more people. And anyway, as it rolled on to last year, and I made the decision last year that I wasn't going to do all of the PBR events
just
anymore.
Big ones.
Just going to do the big ones, you know. And I still do like all the cup events, you know, like all the major events. And there's some there that I don't really want to go to, because, you know, I've got other things going on, you know. I'm riding my cutting horses. If there's a cutting on, you know, like I kind of plan my PBR schedule around when the cutting horse shows are on, you know. Because I've got to that point in my life where I'm like, you know, I like competing, I always have liked competing, but I just really want to, do something that it pleases me, you know, and I still love announcing those big events. There's nothing better than announcing a big event in a sold-out stadium, and lights go out, and it's all you.
And being able to take people on that journey.
On that journey, yes. And that's something, you know, that I working with all of those guys in America, and having worked over there and being exposed to that professionalism, that's what has driven me and kept me in the game. And I used to announce for the National Cutting Horse Association. I did the NCHA Futurity here in Australia for like 10 years. You know, and I still announce the odd cutting horse show here and there, the NCHA National Finals. But, you know, I do some other events too, you know, like a bit of stuff for the Stockman's Challenge at the Rocky Rush, and things like a bit of diverse stuff here and there. Still keep my hand in about 25 events a year, which is enough. And but I kind of think that it's the quality of the events, you know, and there's people out there that think I'm down on rodeo in Australia because I don't do any rodeos anymore. I think the last rodeo I did was the Elite Rodeo in Townsville there, when Quentin Kirsch first started that. You know, I did the first couple of years for him, but they kind of think I'm down on rodeo, but I'm not. I'm a total fan of the sport of rodeo, and I love it just to death. I love watching barrel race. I just love watching rodeo, and but to be that guy that has to be there for 12 hours.
Yeah. Them days are past, yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. And I used to tell those announcers, they'd come over here, and they said, "Oh, what about your rodeos and everything?" I said, "Man," they have marathons, you know, And I said, I said, especially if you go to the ones that run for a couple of days, I said, the national finals and that, I said, they run them pretty good. I said, 3-hour performances every night, I said, but they can't just seem to get to the point of doing that, running that 3-hour performance. They think it's got to go all day and have every single event under the sun. And that's just the way they do it, and I mean, that's just not me. Yeah. I'm there there's no way you can be
at that level.
Yeah,
for that long.
Exactly. You cannot give that kind of a Hollywood experience in 12 hours.
Yeah, too long.
You have to deliver something.
Even 3 hours takes a lot of practice.
We get to 2 hours and 45 minutes at a show, and that's our cut line. That's where we like to be finishing. And if it goes on to 3 hours, like if there's a couple of bulls that don't want to leave, and it gets, and it stretches out to that 3-hour mark, and that we're all looking at each other going, oh, man, this is long. This is long. And you can see it in the people's faces too, because people's attention spans these days are a lot less. One time, like when I started rodeoing and things like that, there wasn't all the gadgets and this sort of stuff, for people to be interacted with, and there wasn't all. Now there's so many sports out there. There's so many diverse sports out there that kids are involved in at school that were never around when we were kids. So they have a whole different, another aspect to explore. And we see a lot less bull riders in Australia now, a lot less bull riders. I mean, I did a head count there only probably 4 or 5 years ago, and there was like 50 open bull riders in all of Australia.
Yeah.
That was it. I did a bit of a survey just to see what the deal was. Now that was 4 or 5 years ago, and I would say there would be less than that now.
Wow.
Open bull riders, guys that are legitimately an open bull rider. And I mean, you still see a lot of guys, at the rodeos, in the second divvy and the novice and that, you see big numbers there. You still see some pretty healthy stuff in the juniors with the introduction of the Can-Am Junior Academy with the PBR, with the mini bulls. It's going to be interesting to see how many of these youngsters actually follow through. All the way through. Because as they get older, they get distracted. Girls, peer pressure, things like that. Life changes for them. Move in different directions. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not there is still bull riding happening here in Australia in 10 years from now. And it struggles because I look at I follow the pro rodeo a lot, and I look at their results, and they've got rodeos there where there'll be 1 bull rider, or there'll be 3 bull riders, or like on average when I look at it, they might get probably 7, and that's kind of numbers back in the day for bareback riders. And I mean the PBR, when we started as the CBR, we used to take 50 guys here back in 1998. We used to take 50 guys, and there was probably 6 or 7 alternates on the list, right? Now we struggle to get 25 bull riders at an event with no alternates, So and that's 25 years later, 26 years later.
What do you think that is?
The culture here in Australia is not. There's been a lot of stuff's fallen by the wayside here in Australia. Like as far as like our heritage with the bush and working on cattle stations.
Like dirt bikes instead of horses now.
Yeah, like guys are mustering in 4-wheelers. Kids are growing up today mustering on 4-wheelers or side-by-sides. Like back when I left school, we were working on cattle stations. We were riding rank horses every day. It was a butt jump show before you started work. And everybody were chasing mad cattle. There was thousands of people employed on cattle stations, and every weekend their favourite thing they did was go to a rodeo. That's what they did, you know. They go to a rodeo, get drunk, you know, and that was what they did. And there were so many ringers riding, and then ringers becoming really good cowboys and evolving in the sport. And I think nearly everybody started that way. And today, there's not those ringers. Where are all the young guys today? You have a look at all the young guys off the land today. What are they doing? They're riding camp draft horses. If they're not riding camp draft horses, they're riding a cutting horse. If they're not riding a cutting horse, they're showing bulls or they're whatever. And the last 20 years or 25 years, I've seen, as soon as Dad gives away the horse on the station, he gives away the horse for mustering, goes to riding motorbikes or side-by-sides, the son gives it away too. And therefore their kids are growing up in an environment they're disassociated from riding horses and having that cowboy experience. And it's just something and as we progress through the time, you know, we're getting less and less of those young people coming through, and the only kids that are basically in the sport are kids whose parents have been in the sport because they're exposed to horses and roping and riding and things like that. So when you look at it and you look at the rodeos and you look at the names now, you're looking at third and fourth generation kids coming through in the junior breakawaying, the junior steer riding, you're seeing that. You're not seeing an influx of outsiders coming in. You're seeing all these generational kids come through, which is healthy, don't get me wrong. But
without that, there would be none coming through.
That's right. There's very little people coming through, you know, and it's sad, very sad in a way, because when I first started riding bulls in North Queensland, I can remember going to Bowen Rodeo one year, and they had 110 bull riders at that rodeo. They had a bull ride on the Saturday afternoon. They had like 100 bull rides. They had 110 the next day. And you go to a rodeo and there'd be, 70 bull riders, easy. That was in North Queensland. You'd go to a SEQ rodeo, which is the NRA these days. You'd go there and there'd be 75, 80 bull riders. You'd go to an ARRA rodeo, they'd have 40, 50 bull riders, You'd go to the ABCRA in New South Wales, same thing, there'd be 70 odd bull riders, So there was hundreds and hundreds of bull riders.
There'd be over 1,000 open bull riders.
Exactly. There was cowboys everywhere, rough stock guys everywhere. And there's always been a lot of time event guys, always has been. And because a lot of the rough stock guys finish riding rough stock, stay on, and then transition into the time events, which is what they do.
It's a natural progression.
Yeah.
For a lot of guys. Whereas
a lot of guys, that I know, like we used to think the camp drafting was basically for old retired cowboys. There was no young guys riding in the camp drafting arena. And Peter Glenwright, he was one of the very few who would come over to the rodeo arena and kick everyone's butt in the bull riding and the calf roping and bulldogging, and win the all round, and was still winning over in the camp draft arena. He was one of the very few guys that could do that. But he was one of the greatest bull riders I've ever seen. But he grew up on a family station, north of Charters Towers. So there again, this is where what I'm saying is a lot of these guys, the kids that are growing up on properties and that now, instead of moving into the rodeo biz, they're camp drafting. There's a lot of money in camp drafting now, and mum and dad don't want to see them get hurt, and I really don't know why. I mean, it does them good to go and get their ass bucked off once every now and then and experience the real world. If there's more kids getting thrown off horses today, I tell you what, there'd be a lot of kids out there doing a lot better in what they do in life, because they'd experience adversity. It takes a bit of ticker and a bit of guts to get up and get on a horse that's just bucked you off, and to get back on that sucker and, and ride through it. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, today aren't learning those experiences of life, and I think that's what rodeo taught me. It was a very good educational format for me, because no matter, you were only as good as your last ride, because the next bull you got on, no matter how confident you were, how good you thought you were, he didn't care about what your resume was. He was just going to throw you off, and that's it.
He was there to do his job.
Yeah, and so I see a lot of kids today. It's always good, and it was probably guys that are a lot older than me. And I always say, I see a lot of kids today, and it is something that us older guys seem to say, and it's not that we're, and I would never ever belittle anybody for getting on a bull or trying to become a bull rider or any kind of competitor in the sport of rodeo. If you've got enough guts to get on a bull and nod your head, and I'll walk up and shake your hand, because man, that is something that only a tiny percentage of people in the world would ever want to try and do. And to try it one time or 10 times or whatever, but to go on with it and to go through it and get hurt, get back on. It's truly is something that grooms you and sets you up that for the rest of your life, no matter what happens in life, you can tackle it head on. And I think that's what I was able to do with my announcing was, no matter what kind of the story or what the situation was, I had to tackle it and overcome that and try and turn that, whatever happened in that arena, into a positive situation that made the fans have a good experience. And it's whether or not, livestock have got hurt or cowboys have been hurt or whatever. You have to be able to still have that feel-good experience,
And have you noticed difference in the animals nowadays?
No doubt about it. I mean, the bulls are really, really good. The bulls are really good, And I will say this, that ever since the sport started here in Australia, there has been outstanding bucking stock. Every year, the best bucking stock of the year, whoever wins the bucking bull of the year or the bucking horse of the year, regardless of the era,
would never misplace now.
They were always exceptional. So you would go to a rodeo, and there were some contractors that would have, they might bring 20 bulls to a rodeo, but then they would buck them bulls 3 times for the day. Those bulls would have 3 trips today. They'd do another rodeo tomorrow. They'd have another 3 trips tomorrow, and then have another 3 trips the next day. If it was a 3-long weekend and they were doing 3 rodeos. So those bulls, and some of those bulls got better. And I remember contractor, old Bert Hall. He was from down at Matotek in Victoria, and Bert was one of the pioneers in stock contracting in Australia, and I was lucky enough to go to some of Bert's rodeos when I was a young guy and get on some of these bulls, and it was quite the experience. And he had halters on all those bulls and big leads, and he had this old half Chinese cross woman with him, this Shane, and she could fight and swear with the best of them. And old Bert wasn't partial to giving you a mouthful while you're getting on his bulls. And he did that to intimidate you. Like, if you were getting on one of Bert's bulls at a rodeo, you used to have to stand on the side of the chute and warm your rope up. You weren't allowed to sit on them in the chute. You had to stand off them while you're taking your wrap. So he had this rope that used to come down off they're tied around their horns. They'd go down through a nose ring. And what old Bert and Shane would do, they were pretty cluey back in the day. They'd pull that rope up and they'd pull that nose ring up tight like that on them bulls, right? So that nose ring was pulling up on those bulls' head, and then he would tie 20 foot of rope around their heads like that. And he used to buck them with horse flanks. Okay? So I heard a lot of different stories about how he trained his bulls and what he used to do with them and everything. And you know, I have my reservations on that. But I only know from what I experienced getting on his bulls at rodeos. And when you slid up there to nod your head, he would sing out at those bulls their name. Hey, Turnbuckle, you know, hey, Silver, or what, you know what I mean? He'd just start singing out of them. Those bulls would just turn back right there. And by pulling that rope, it took me a long time to work it out what he was doing. A lot of times Bert's bulls, because he used to keep them on the road, he used to drove his bucking stock a lot. And a lot of times his bulls, they were half poor and they had their skin would be loose, or, you know, like this. Or sometimes they might come up and they'd be big and fat. But what he was doing was, a bull gets a lot of drop when he throws his head in the air. When he throws his head back like that, he gets all this drop. So by pulling on that nose ring with that rope, those bulls, every time they bucked, they'd throw their head up like this as they kicked. So they would get all this drop. And because they'd be half poor, but really, really bucky, that they were tough to ride. They were tough to ride, you know. And there was a story that I was told, and it's a true story, about at a rodeo in London, just outside of Sydney there years ago, back in the late 70s. And there were 75 bull riders at this rodeo. And Bert turned up there with 12 bulls. Anyway, he bucked the first round of bulls, no scores, let them all up into the chutes, bucked the next round of bulls, no scores. Anyway, apparently there was someone left the gate open and all his bulls got out. And the only two bulls he could catch was Old Champ and Silver City. And he led those bulls up into them chutes and finished that rodeo. They bucked them like 25 times each. Finished that rodeo, and it was like 3 scores.
What was one of them? Silver City.
Silver City. Yeah, he was a bucker bull of the year.
I heard that name.
Yeah, he was a bucker. And Paul Farley, who was another great bull rider back in the late 70s, early 80s, he rode that bull at one of them rodeos out west, Nevertire or Warren or Gerald Ambone or something like that. He rode that bull out of shotgun chutes and was 94 points on him, and it was never ever put in as a record for the ABCRA.
Why is that?
They never used to keep records much back in the day. So he was never ever given the honour of that,
the highest
score back in the day, you know, just through, you know, inefficiencies in the office management and things like that, you know. But I wasn't there, but they tell me it was, you know, an incredible ride, you know, and you know, some of the rides I've seen over the years, you know, I mean,
I was going to ask you that, like, especially announcing and rodeoing a long time before that, you would have seen some cracker bull rides over the time.
I saw some good bulls over the years, some scary bulls. I mean, some scary suckers. I mean, Johnson Brothers down in southeast Queensland, they used to get first pick of Pat Speedy's bulls back in the day. So if you went to a Johnson Brothers rodeo, yeah, you better have your hammer cocked, because them things were wild. They were scary. And I just come back from the States. And I went to Warwick, and anyway, I drew J10. Me and Luke Lindley went down to Warwick, and I said, "What's this J10?" He said, "Oh, that's Deep Springs." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I've heard of that bull." So I went down there, and anyway, he's just a big brindle, white face, big horns, just like 40 of them that I've been on riding over there in Texas. Same looking thing, you know. And but I'd never ever seen the bull buck, you know. And anyway, I'm getting on him, and all these guys, all these NRA guys, all stand up on the chutes. They're all got their eyes watching, you know, this guy getting on Deep Springs. They were just thinking, "Oh man, he's gonna get killed," you know. And Eddie Fisher said to me, I'm getting on him and I'm pulling my rope, and he said, "Wazzer," he said, "when you go to get up on your rope," he said, "don't put your hand up on the rail like that to pull yourself up. He said, you're going to have to move up with your feet on the chute. Get up into this. Don't put your hand up there," he said, "because he'll break your hand with his horn." And I said, okay, so that's all good. So Eddie got on him. Anyway, bull bucked me off right on the whistle. And I got out of there and everything, I got away from him. I think Morris Morton was there bullfighting back then, and Dennis Johnson and that, and those guys, they fought those bulls all the time, so they knew they
could handle them.
They were tough guys, And I got away from him, and anyway, but it was just nothing, I got on Bambi there once at Townsville there, and one of the most powerful bulls I've ever been on.
Wow.
Bambi. He was just incredibly powerful.
And who was that? Johnson Brothers or
No, Happy Gill.
I thought so. Yeah.
And he was the bull. He was the number 2 bull of the year. And when Chainsaw was winning the Buck and Bull of the Year title, Bambi was runner up all the time, and so it was neck and neck between those two every year as to who was the best bull. But
Did you ever get a shot at Chainsaw?
No, I went to, I don't know how many Gary's rodeos I went to, and never ever drew 327. And I saw a lot of guys get on that bull, and I saw Troy ride him at Holbrook one night. Incredible ride. I was there when Dave Johnson rode him for the first time in Tamworth.
Darren Brandenburg was like a magnet to that thing. He drew him 13 times.
Yeah, Brandy got on him a few times, and Mick Gray rode him, Dean Pace rode him, Brendan Antone rode him, and Troy rode him, I think, 3 times or something, every time he got on him. First time he slapped him. That was down at the rodeo down in Victoria there somewhere. He slapped him, they said, but he rode him. And I've seen a lot of really good bulls, like every year, there's another great bull, there is another superstar evolving in the sport, and right now there's so many, like I said, back in when I was riding bulls, there was really, really good bulls, but you go to a rodeo and there was always a tail. Every stock contractor had a tail because there were so many bull riders that they couldn't have that many great bulls, and they weren't breeding bulls back then. Not too many guys were. Like Gary was dibbling in it. Gills they had their finger in the pie. They were always breeding back from old Dr. Jekyll and 007 and bulls like that. And Bert Hall, Bert, he bred a lot of bulls from old Eagle. And that, so when you were getting on Bert's bulls, you're getting on a lot of black and white bulls, and that all come from old Eagle. So, and then there was guys like Lloyd Morgan, like they said he had every coloured bull under the sun, even a purple one. Lloyd had turned up with 70 bulls, to a rodeo. And so there was always great bulls, and there was always great bull rides being made. And today, with the PBR especially, it's become, because of television and everything is in real time now. You can turn on your TV, pick on your phone, and you're watching everything that happens in the US instantly. It's absolutely amazing. I still can't believe that I can watch what's happening in Pendleton, Oregon right now.
And you can FaceTime your friend in America.
Yeah.
Straight on your phone, bang.
Yeah. And we can watch all that. We never had that, like we never even had videos to watch ourselves ride, until later on when we got to get people started doing videos of rodeos, and oh man, that's what I look like when I'm riding a bull. Man, oh gee, well I need to really lift my game, like I look like a sack of shit, But you have to those were the times as we progressed, and now, I look at the bulls now, and I look at some of the bull riders that are about now, and the guys that are at the top of their game are absolutely, elite athletes. They are great bull riders. Yeah, they are great bull riders. I'm not talking good bull riders, I'm talking great bull riders, And then there's still your average guys. Still your average guys there that haven't worked it out yet. Haven't really twigged that it's all in their head,
And like you said at the start of the interview, you started riding at 13 or open bulls at 13, and you didn't think you really figured out till you were 25, till you thought that you really
Yeah, when I was 25, and the first year I went to America, and I was riding every bull, everything I got on. Like I got that consistency is it took me that long to get that consistency down where I could go to a rodeo and I had my own practice pen at home. I would get on 2 bulls every Tuesday, 2 bulls every Thursday, and then I would go away rodeoing. We would jump in a car, Darren Brandenburg, Luke Lindley, Owen Dunn, myself. We'd jump in a rent-a-car and we'd drive from Townsville, we'd drive all the way down to New South Wales to go and compete at a rodeo on the weekend and be back and go to work Monday morning, Things like that, Or we would, during the summertime, you'd go and you'd be on the road all the time. But in saying that, it took me a long time to work that out, and I guess I was very late maturing. And by the time I was 25, I'd already done a lot of damage to my body. Okay, so my days were numbered really from then. I had a lot of trouble with knee, my back, my ribs, my neck, things like that, from time to time. But so I only had that short window of about 4 years, 3 or 4 years there where I had it figured out. And I was riding, the lines percentage of the bulls. I was riding like 70% of my bulls, and I was really, really getting somewhere. But I was never that guy that was I chose to, if a bull riding, if somewhere came up and they had big money, good bull riders were going, that's where I went, rather than going to a rodeo in my circuit.
Yeah.
I wanted to go where the best bulls were. And
instead of chasing just the title.
Yeah, I wanted to be riding where the best guys were. And that was because in 1989, a good friend of mine, Craig Melville, Jack McGugan from Taroom, and myself, we started one of the very first standalone bull ridings in all of Australia. And it was called the Top Gun Bull Riding, just out of Townsville at Melville's Pioneer Farm. We put up all this prize money, got multiple contractors in, invited good bull riders to come, and started selling this thing. And it just sold out every year. I think the first year there was like 5,000 people there, and it just grew and grew and grew. So there was very, very few standalone bull riding events at the time. I think the other big one might have been at Collinsville. They had a 3-head one night thing. So you'd go there and you'd watch 140 bull rides in one night,
Wow.
And every man and his dog would be there for like $3,000 in prize money. I mean, I'm talking big money, But we were riding for $300 wins at rodeo.
Yeah.
The biggest win I won at a rodeo in Australia ever was I won Mingler one year, and I won a little over $1,600, I think.
Wow.
Which was probably equivalent to about $8,000 today. But that was at one rodeo here in Australia. Mingler was
one of the big ones.
Well, at the time, apart from Mount Isa, it was the second biggest paying rodeo in Australia.
Wow.
And it was a big paying rodeo. So when these standalone bull ridings started happening, the money started picking up for the bull riders, So it was only a matter of time. And I think it was about 1995, Doug Vickers and Steve Thorne and those guys started what they called the Australian Pro Bull Riders Association. Okay, so it was a predecessor to the CBR. But what they were doing was they were running a second division bull riding and a bull riding, but they didn't have any money, they didn't have any sponsors, they didn't have a plan. They were just putting on bull riding events.
Yeah.
Pardon me, but that's what they were doing. So bull riders started clinging to these events because they're pretty cool. They didn't have to sit there for 12 hours until their bull ran in the chute.
Yeah, the last event of the night.
Damn right. They went, wow, we can turn up here and, we can turn up here and we're on at 7 o'clock tonight. We're out of there. We're in our car heading off at 10 o'clock that night, heading home with a big check. And that's a big thing, for bull riders, and I learnt that in '94 when I was over in the US going to those pro rodeos and bull ridings, There was all these big money bull ridings around, and it was like a lot of guys, that's where the direction they were going, you know, in favour of the rodeos. You know, if there was a rodeo on just down the road, well, they'd hit it. But it was inevitable that Australia would follow suit.
Yeah.
You know, with big money bull riding and guys getting some notoriety, you know, about what they do, you know, and guys that are, you know, like becoming household names, you know, and you start looking at them, you know, like your Dave Kennedys, and then you move on down the track and you get to guys like Aaron Clyde, you know.
And Cody
Hefner, people like that, you know, they just rattle names off the top of your tongue, you know, Fraser Babington, people like that. And then the amount of Australians that have gone on ever since you go way back to when Troy was over there riding in the PBR, and, you know, your Dean Pace and, you know, your Scott Frasers and, you know, Chris Burks and, you know, Noose Cook and Rodney Lidgard and guys like that that really, really took advantage of professional bull riding and went to the US, and the world looked at Australia as, wow, these guys can ride bulls. You know what I mean? There's guys from Australia that can ride bulls, that are talented and can win anywhere in the world. So it had to become a global thing, you know, bull riding.
It's crazy now how easy it is for guys to get opportunities to head straight over to the States now. Like, there's a bunch of Australians over there doing extremely well.
Well, that was the whole thing, you know, with Troy and Glenn, myself, and, you know, guys like Morris Morton, and that's been there, you know, ever since day one, you know. It's all about, you know, the dream was, you know, like, bull riding is never ever going to be as big as what it is in the US here in Australia.
We just don't have the people.
No, but we can give guys opportunities to get there, and we can give them, groom them here, give them experience to go and pathways to get there. Because without a pathway for them, to be so talented and to put them into, like, say, Troy's category of being just an absolute freak, you know, a guy that was just so driven, so committed and so talented to be able to do what he did, and to put them into that kind of, put every bull rider here in Australia into that, wrap them up into that particular package, to send them there and expect them to go over there and win, you know, is not going to happen.
Yeah.
They have to gain experience. They have to have a foundation, and they have to have a clear pathway
for that opportunity.
So when they go there, they're ready. Because I never forget the first time I climbed over a chute at I think it was Red Lodge, Montana, or so. I forget where it was. Some rodeo over there, and I'm getting on, and I've got Clint Bronger in the chute behind me, and some other NFR bull rider, you know, on the other side of me over here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, wow, you know, there's all these good bull riders here, and it's a little tough. You know, you do get intimidated.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and but like I say, it takes a long time to work that out. You know.
What do you think of the teams deals they're doing now? Do you like that format?
I like the concept. I don't follow it very much.
Yeah.
I don't follow it very much. Only little bit I do see is what's on social media. I kind of still a little old school. I like the individual world championship race. That really pushes my buttons. You know, I'm a fan of that individual race. I still love the teams concept. I love the state of origin concept that we have here in Australia. You know, and that, by the way, was the first teams concept that the PBR had anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
Was when we did it in 2019 in Sydney.
Yeah,
the PBR had never ever had teams format.
So it started
only ever with the teams with the
Global Cup.
With the Global Cup and the World Cup. So when you get back to it, the first teams deal was held here at the World Cup in 2007 at the Gold Coast. The first actual teams competition, apart from that globally, was held here in Australia.
Wow.
So there's been a lot of good things that Australia has done, you know, that the PBR and the US have taken notice of, and they're very responding to what we do here. They understand that we have a different market. And they understand that financially we don't have what they have.
Yeah, don't have the budget.
The sponsors and everything like that, like everything's all, we're kind of like the poor cousin type thing, But in saying that, we still have to maintain and run an event
at
that level. That is a priority, and anytime you think that, I walk out there, and I'm wearing that hat, PBR announcer, that's what I have to represent. I'm representing not PBR Australia, but a global organisation and a global sport. So that's where you have to get to in what you do. You have to be that guy that can do that,
And that sort of leads me on to my next question. What advice would you give to a young fella that wanted to either make a living riding bulls or maybe go on to announcing at the level you've sort of done it for a long time?
Well, as far as riding bulls, I'd tell anyone, give it a go.
Yeah.
Go to a bull riding school and give it a go, right? And you don't have to get on bulls. I mean, there's still rodeos around out there where you can get on steers and start off small. You know what I mean? Get your experience, get on these mini bulls and that kind of thing. But give it a go. But have one thing clear in your mind, that you have to commit yourself 100% every time you nod your head. If you're not in at 100%, don't even try.
Yeah.
Because your life is not worth it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You have to be all in or all out.
Yeah.
There's no...
You can't play with this
Not
game.
dipping, you can't just dip your toe in the water here and, say, I'll give this a crack.
Half in, half out.
Yeah. Give it a go with a clear intention of giving it your all.
Yeah.
And I think as far as guys that I'd love to see more guys out there taking on announcing. I mean, there is an announcer under every tree, every bush in the US. I mean, you can walk up and shake a bush and 10 announcers will fall out, over there. I mean, it's like, there is so many good ones because they make so much money over there. There is so much money. Those guys are making millions of dollars a year, And
they cut their teeth on even just the bar rodeos and local goat ropings, and there's guys announcing them and sort of
still making a living.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many opportunities over there, and I know, getting back to Garrett Yarrigan, and him and I were having this discussion one day, and because they do run some announcer schools and that over in the US, and there's been a couple of people that have gone over there and come back and think they're going to. They've been to a school, they're going to get going. But like Garrett said, you really have to have a voice for it, and you have to have a natural flair for it. But then, my God, you have got to work hard, and if you're not prepared to work hard and go through all the bullshit rodeos and all the crappy events that you have to work when you first start off.
Miles, no money.
Just to get to that point, you know what I mean, to be able to start to hone your craft. And there's not a lot of opportunities either here, because there's not a lot of real good events to go to here in Australia.
And like you said before, that you want to stay on the top of your game to keep your spot, so you're not going to let it up. So.
No, and so the reason why I don't want to go to some events, that's why I stopped doing the rodeos for fact, because the rodeo business wasn't treating it like an entertainment entity. Okay? They want to run these rodeos for ridiculous lengths of time and just run it how the Cowboys want to run it. Okay, they don't want to run it for the fans, or the sponsors, I mean, and so to go, well, I don't want to keep doing the same thing. I'm here to get better. I'm here to grow with this thing, and I want to announce the biggest events that there is. I've had an opportunity to do that. So, but I wouldn't have done that if I had just stayed content and
where you're at,
where I was at, you know what I mean? Walking out in the arena with a microphone and a clipboard, for Christ's sakes.
And like you said, every time you went to the States, you come back better.
You'd come back because you'd learn something more working with other guys, and they'd be always, you'd be learning off them, listening and learning what they were doing, how they interact with audiences. So you have to work your absolute guts out if you want to get somewhere. You know, there's no gimmies in this world. You know, nobody's ever going to walk up and give you something unless you've earned it.
Yeah.
You know, and
you
that's
can't
what.
sit and wait.
No, that's why you win a PBR Australian bull riding championship. I mean, man, you have earned that sucker.
Yeah.
You know, you have bled, you have broken, you have done everything possibly, abused your body in a huge way to win a buckle and a title.
That don't happen by accident.
No. And so you've really got to be prepared to put in the work as an announcer. And the biggest mistake I see a lot of guys do is they become repetitive. They say the same thing over and over and over and over and over. 100 times a night, you'll hear announcers all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. 100 times a night, you'll count it up, you know. Think of a different way to relate to the audience. Have them thinking to themselves, what is he going to say next?
Yeah.
You know, how is he going to, you know, what's he going to say next? Don't keep saying the same thing over and over. And to learn that, you know, and I got stuck in that rut too, believe it or not, when I was doing those rodeos, because there wasn't a lot to talk about.
And it goes for so long.
Yeah, so you just had to get by. But when you get to these these bull ridings and in these buildings and overseas where, you know, it is a multi-million-dollar industry and a crowd, people are paying $200 and $300 a ticket, you know, then they want to see a Las Vegas production every single time. So you have to, that's where, like I say, you have to step up and work out how you're going to do it. You've got to go in there with a plan, and then you have to let it roll, you know. And I think at the end of the day, like I say, if any guy ever wants to start or wants advice on becoming an announcer, you know, in Australia, I'm only too happy to help them out, you know.
Yeah, well.
And I've always thought about just having a little workshop sometime, you know, and just saying, hey, you know, putting an ad on Facebook or something. Anyone wants to come and listen to what I've got to say, and I'll show them a few things for nothing. You know what I mean? Just come and do it, because, like I say, there's not a lot of opportunities in Australia, apart from the PBR or the biggest horse shows that are out there. Like some of the big horse shows, you know, like Australia's Greatest Horseman, you know, the NCHA Futurity. You know, some of those really big events are great to announce and be a part of. There's not a lot of events in Australia that are really
at that top tier
level. You know, and that's the reason why I chose to stay and go with the PBR direction, because of that particular fact. I was looking after my career as well as trying to get better.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that there was the only way that I could move forward here in Australia was to take that road. You know, yeah.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Warren. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of guys will learn a lot about your story, and there's so many good bits in it that I hope people get inspired and keep going down the road. I think cowboy, there's no better lifestyle, so if we can inspire some young kids to take this as a career and continue down the road from stuff they've heard from you, it would be great.
Yeah, well, like I say, you know, I mean, it is, you know, my story is my story. And, you know, I tend not to get too wrapped up in it. You know, I'm not one that likes to get out there and blow his own trumpet or anything like that. But, you know, I just hope that, you know, if somebody, you know, if I inspire some little kid out there that says, hey, you know, man, I wouldn't mind having a go on a microphone at a, you know, at a junior rodeo or something, you know, well, that's great, you know. But like, I mean, my phone's always on, and if anybody wants to call me or whatever and wants to know something or a thing I can help them out with, you know, I'd gladly do it, you know.
And like this interview, I tracked you down. You didn't contact me about telling your story. I wanted to hear yours.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that, because that's like I say, that's who I am. You know, I'm just a guy who does what he does, you know, and has a plan, you know, and I think that, you know, like, you know, the Western sports industry in Australia is absolutely growing at a ferocious rate right now. You know, who would have thought that you could go to any day of the week now, you could go to a camp draft, a cutting horse show, a rodeo, a barrel racing, or whatever discipline that you're involved in. You can go every single day of the week to something involved in Western sports in Australia.
That's amazing, yeah.
And from when I was a kid, where it was, I mean, only went for like Saturday and Sunday.
And you might have to drive 1,000 k's to get there.
And we used to all wait with bated breath. 3 months. It used to be March, I think, when we'd get the January issue of the American Western Horseman magazine to see who won the world titles and the national finals in the PRCA, for Christ's sakes. It would be 3 months later, we'd find out, oh, Donny Gay won another world title or such and such. You know, we'd be reading it, you know. We'd go to the newsagent to get that magazine, and it'd be the first thing everybody was after, you know. Who knew, you know? Nobody knew. But now, we watch it live.
Straight away.
Incredible. But yeah, anyway, thank you for what you do, Ben. You know, I mean, you're doing the real good justice to the Western sports industry here in Australia, and I just hope you continue to be able to talk to people and continue their, you know, keep people's interest alive in what people have done in the past.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries, buddy.